Welcome back, guys. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. Thank you. When the phone rang, it had been raining without stopping for 3 days. It was the kind of rain that was heavy, cold, and turned dirt roads into rivers, washing mud down the sides of the Appalachian Mountains. While I was doing my usual equipment checks at Fort Bragg, Lieutenant Caldwell found me in the engine pool. His boots were covered in red mud, and there was a look in his eyes that said, "You won't be sleeping for the next 72 hours. Smith," he said quickly, "there's a problem in West Virginia. A landslide near Spruce Knob uncovered something. Something old." I dropped my wrench and wiped my hands. How old? So old that no one knew it was supposed to be there. 3 hours later, I was in the front seat of a Humvee, driving through mountain roads that twisted like broken fingers. The rain wouldn't stop, and as Caldwell drove silently, raindrops washed across the windshield. In the back seat, Sergeant Marcus Reynolds kept checking his gear. This was something Mac always did when he was nervous. He counted the deer-rings and carabiners like prayer beads. Corporal Riley Donovan sat beside him, headphones on, listening to the static and broken radio signals caused by the storm. The smell in the cab was wet canvas and diesel mixed with that metal-like smell you get from long drives through mountain fog. My mouth tasted like copper. Every few miles, Caldwell would look at the coordinates written on a piece of paper taped to the dashboard. No GPS up here. The satellites couldn't see through the trees and the weather. "What are we pulling out?" I asked. Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Vehicles. Military trucks found by a forestry crew doing storm damage checks. They called the ranger station. Rangers called the state police. State police sent it to us." "How many vehicles?" "They're not sure. The crew only saw part of one before the supervisor told them to back off and protect the area." Mac leaned forward between the seats. "If it's been buried long enough for forestry to not know about it, we're talking many, many years. What kind of transport goes missing for that long?" Nobody answered that. The question sat there in the cab like a fourth passenger while the rain drummed overhead and the wipers fought a losing battle. I counted the mile markers under my breath. 42, 43, 44. Counting helped keep my mind steady when things didn't make sense. We reached the coordinates just after 2 p.m. The road had turned into a logging trail, then into nothing but ruts and standing water. Caldwell parked where the ground was still solid, and we all climbed out into the rain. It hit my face like cold needles. Within seconds, we were soaked. The forestry crew had left yellow tape tied between trees, marking a path down the slope. The supervisor, a man named Patterson with a gray beard and eyes that had seen too many winters, met us at the tape line. He didn't shake hands, just nodded toward the ravine. "Down there," he said, "about 40 yards. Be careful. Ground's not stable." We followed him down, boots sliding in mud, grabbing small trees to keep from falling. The smell changed as we went down. Wet earth, rotting leaves, and something else underneath. Something like old oil and rust. The kind of smell that comes from metal that's been buried so long it's become part of the soil. Then I saw it. The mudslide had torn a deep cut down the hillside, carving through many years of forest floor. And there, half showing in the raw earth, was the front end of a truck. Not modern. The grill was from before 1950, maybe even wartime. The metal was rusted and eaten through in places, but the shape was clear, military transport, deuce and a half. And behind it, barely visible through the mud, were the shadows of more vehicles. "Jesus," Mac whispered. Caldwell stood at the edge of the cut, rain running off his helmet. "How many?" Patterson shook his head. "Can't tell. We've only dug enough to confirm what it is. The whole convoy's down there. Could be 3 trucks. Could be 10. I moved closer, crouching at the edge where the mud met the metal. The truck's hood was bent, the windshield long gone. Inside the cab, I could see twisted metal, rotted fabric, and what might have been a steering wheel. No bodies visible. Not yet. Donovan knelt beside me, pulling out a handheld frequency scanner. If they've got any electronics, even old vacuum tube radios, they might still give off signals. "After 60 years?" Mac asked. "Strange things happen in the mountains," Donovan said quietly. He didn't look up from his scanner. I stood and walked around the slide. The rain made it hard to see, but I counted at least 4 separate vehicle shapes buried in the hillside. The convoy had been moving in a line when something stopped them here. No road visible, no clue as to why they'd been off any known route. Just trees, rock, and the vehicles slowly being eaten by the earth. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "If these trucks went missing, there'd be records. Search efforts. Even in the 1940s, you don't lose a whole convoy." Caldwell pulled a radio from his belt. "I'm calling it in. We need ground radar, digging equipment, and a forensics team and permission." "This is federal land," Patterson added, "but it's also possibly a historical site, maybe a grave site." The word hung in the air. Grave site. I looked back at the trucks, half swallowed by mud and time, and tried not to think about what might be sealed inside them. The rain got harder. Water ran down the cut in thick streams, pulling more mud away from the convoy. I watched a chunk of earth slide free, showing more of the second truck's cargo bed. Something was back there. Shapes under rotted canvas. "We need to secure this before the whole hillside comes down," Mac said. Caldwell nodded. "Set up a boundary. Tarps and stakes. Smith, Donovan, document everything before we start moving earth. Photos, measurements, positions. I want a complete record." We spent the next hour working in the rain, taking photos from every angle, measuring distances, marking GPS coordinates on waterproof paper. The smell of old oil grew stronger as we worked. It mixed with the rain and the mud until I couldn't tell where one smell ended and another began. My hands were numb, my boots squelched with every step. Donovan set up his equipment near the first truck, running a cable down to a sensor he'd placed against the metal. The scanner's screen glowed in the dim light, showing waves and frequency bands. He watched it for a long time, not saying anything. "What have you got?" I asked. "Interference," he said slowly. "There's a signal coming from down there. Weak, but steady. Like a pulse." "A pulse from what?" "I don't know. Could be leftover electrical charge from the vehicle's wiring. Could be groundwater creating a current through the metal. Could be something else." I looked at the buried trucks. "Could be something else" wasn't what I wanted to hear. By 4 p.m., Caldwell had talked with command. They were sending a recovery team, but it would take time. The storm had closed most of the mountain roads. We were looking at least a 12-hour wait, possibly longer. Until then, we were to secure the site and begin basic documentation. The 4 of us set up a base camp 50 yards upslope where the ground was stable. 2 tents, portable lights powered by a generator that coughed and sputtered in the wet air. Mac got a fire going under a tarp cover, more for morale than warmth. We sat around it eating MREs and watching the rain turn the forest into a gray blur. "I looked up the area history," Donovan said, scrolling through files on a rugged tablet. Spruce Knob region was used for training during World War II. Mountain warfare, cold weather operations. There were camps scattered through these hills. "Any record of convoys going missing?" Caldwell asked. "Nothing official, but there are gaps in the logs. Weeks where no activity is recorded. Then suddenly normal operations start again." He looked up from the screen. "It's like someone erased parts of the timeline." Mac poked the fire with a stick. "Or like someone didn't want certain operations written down in the first place." I thought about that. About convoys moving through mountains at night. No headlights, no radio contact, carrying cargo that didn't officially exist. It happened during the war. It happened after. I'd heard stories, the kind that got told quietly in motor pools and late-night guard shifts. Trucks that vanished, equipment that went off the books, sites that weren't on any map. "We should check the trucks tonight," I said, "before the rain gets worse. If there's anything inside that can tell us what they were carrying, we need to document it." Caldwell nodded slowly. "Just a quick look. We go down, photograph the insides, check for any identifying marks or cargo lists. Donovan, you're with me. Smith, Reynolds, you secure the perimeter and watch for any changes in the slide." I didn't argue, but part of me wanted to be the one going into those trucks. The other part, the part that had learned to trust my gut over 12 years of service, was glad I'd be staying up top. They geared up and headed down the slope, flashlights cutting through the rain. I watched their lights bob and weave through the trees until they reached the convoy. Then Mac and I settled in to wait. The forest was quiet except for the rain. No birds, no insects, just water falling through leaves and the soft hiss of the generator. I counted the minutes. 5, 10, 15. 20 minutes, my radio crackled. "Smith, you seeing this?" It was Donovan's voice, tight and strange. "Seeing what?" "The mud around the trucks. It's moving." I grabbed my rifle and started down the slope, Mac right behind me. The rain had picked up again, turning the path into a slippery slide. I half ran, half slid, using trees to control my descent. The smell hit me before I reached the bottom. That oil and rust smell, but stronger now, richer, almost alive. Caldwell and Donovan stood at the first truck, flashlights pointed at the ground. The mud around the vehicle's wheels was shifting, rippling like water disturbed by something moving underneath. As I watched, the truck settled lower, sinking another inch into the hillside. "The whole slide is not stable," Caldwell said. "The rain's turning it into liquid. We need to get away." But Donovan wasn't moving. He stood frozen, staring at the truck's cab. His flashlight beam was steady, locked on the interior. "Donovan," I said, "we need to move. There's someone in there," he whispered. I stepped closer, raising my own light. Through the broken windshield, past the rust and rot, I could see the driver's seat. And in that seat, partly hidden by shadows and decay, was a shape human still. Hands on the wheel. The body had been preserved by the dry pocket of air inside the cab, saved in the strange way that happens when conditions are exactly right. The uniform was visible, though stained and falling apart. But what made my skin crawl was the position. The driver sat upright, head turned slightly as if looking over his shoulder, waiting for something. "We document this and get out," Caldwell ordered. "Now." Donovan raised his camera, taking fast shots while Mac and I provided light. The truck groaned, settling again. Mud oozed up around the running boards. Behind it, the second vehicle shifted with a sound like tearing metal. "The whole group's collapsing," Mac said. "If we don't move now, we're going down with them." We backed away slowly, boots fighting for purchase in the mud. Caldwell took one last look at the driver, then turned and pushed Donovan up the slope. The four of us scrambled upward, grabbing roots and branches, pulling ourselves out of the ravine. Behind us, the convoy groaned and settled deeper into the earth. We made it to the tape line before the first truck disappeared. It went slowly, almost gracefully, the mud swallowing it like a mouth closing. The sound was wet and final. By the time we reached base camp, 3 of the 4 visible vehicles had vanished, sucked back into the hillside. I stood there in the rain, breathing hard, watching the last truck's canvas top sink below the surface. The forest was quiet again. The smell of oil and rust faded, replaced by wet earth and pine. "What the heck just happened?" Mac asked. Nobody answered. We were all thinking the same thing. That convoy had been there for many years, stable, hidden. And the moment we found it, the moment we started asking questions, it disappeared. Donovan pulled out his scanner again. The screen showed the same pulsing signal, but stronger now, coming from deeper underground. Coming from where the trucks had vanished. "It's still transmitting," he said quietly. "Whatever's down there, it's still active." Caldwell looked at his watch. "We've got 10 hours until the recovery team arrives. Nobody goes near that slide until then. We document what we've seen, we secure the perimeter, and we wait." But waiting felt wrong. I could feel it in my gut. That feeling that keeps you alive when training fails. Something about this site was off. Not just the buried convoy, not just the preserved driver, but something deeper. Something that had been waiting in the dark for someone to find it. I thought about the driver's position, head turned, looking back like he'd seen something coming up behind the convoy. Something that made them stop in the middle of nowhere, far from any road, far from any help. The rain drummed on the tent. The generator hummed. And somewhere below my feet, buried in tons of mud and time, something pulsed steadily, waiting. Before we continue, you need to know this isn't just a recovery story. What happened next would make you question everything you thought you knew about those mountains. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We settled in for the night, taking 2-hour watches in rotation. The rain never stopped. The smell never quite went away. And when the wind shifted, I could swear I heard metal groaning deep underground. That was just the beginning. The facility. 10 p.m. to midnight, sitting under the tarp cover with a thermos of bad coffee and a rifle across my knees. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, but the fog had rolled in thick enough to cut. You couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. The forest disappeared into gray nothing. I kept the portable lights low, just enough to see the perimeter markers we'd set. Every 15 minutes, I'd do a circle, checking the tape lines, listening for movement. The mudslide area was quiet. No groaning metal, no shifting earth, just silence. So complete it pressed against your eardrums. At 10:47 p.m., Donovan's scanner went off. The alert was soft, just a double beep from inside his tent. But in that silence, it sounded like a gunshot. I moved to the tent flap and looked in. Donovan was already awake, sitting up with the scanner in his lap. The screen showed the same signal pattern, but the frequency had changed sharper, more clear. "It's getting stronger," he said without looking up. "The signal's moving closer to the surface." "How close?" "About 15 feet down, directly below where the first truck was." I thought about that. The convoy had sunk deeper into the hillside. By rights, the signal should have gotten weaker, not stronger, unless whatever was transmitting wasn't in the trucks at all. Unless it was something else buried down there, and the trucks had just been sitting on top of it. "Wake Caldwell," I said. Donovan shook his head. "Not yet. Let me run a few more scans. If the signal stays steady, we'll bring it to him in the morning. No point interrupting his sleep for something we can't explain anyway." I wanted to argue, but he was right. What would we tell Caldwell? That something underground was broadcasting? We already knew that. Without more information, waking him would just mean 4 people staring at a screen instead of 2. I returned to my watch position and poured more coffee. It had gone cold. I drank it anyway, counting the minutes until my shift ended. 37, 38, 39. The numbers kept you grounded when your mind wanted to wander into darker places. At 11:18 p.m., I heard the first voice. It came through the rain, faint and distorted. At first, I thought it was wind through the trees, but wind doesn't form words. This did. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but the rhythm was human speech. Conversation. I keyed my radio. "Donovan, you hearing this?" "Negative." "Hearing what?" I stood and moved toward the sound. It was coming from downslope, somewhere near the mudslide. My flashlight cut through the fog in a weak beam. Nothing moved. The voice continued, rising and falling like someone telling a story. Then it stopped. "Smith, report." Caldwell's voice in my ear, sharp and awake. I thought I heard voices near the slide site. "How many?" "1, maybe 2. Hard to tell through the rain." "Hold position. I'm coming to you." 30 seconds later, Caldwell came out of his tent, rifle ready. Mac followed, eyes scanning the tree line. We moved together down the slope, staying in formation, lights low. The tape markers appeared out of the fog like yellow ghosts. When we reached the slide area, everything was still. The mud sat flat and undisturbed. No tracks, no signs of anyone having been there. But the smell had returned. That oil and rust scent mixed with something new. Something that reminded me of the smell after lightning. Caldwell swept his light across the area. "You sure you heard voices?" "I heard something," I said. Mac crouched near the edge of the slide. "Ground's warm here." "What?" "The mud is giving off heat. Feel it." I placed my hand near the surface. He was right. The air above the mud was noticeably warmer than the surrounding forest, like something underneath was making heat, or like something had recently been hot and was still cooling down. "This doesn't make sense," Caldwell muttered. "Mud doesn't just warm up in 40-degree weather." Donovan's voice crackled through the radio. "You need to get back up here. The signal just spiked." We moved fast, climbing the slope with less care than we should have. When we reached base camp, Donovan was standing outside his tent, scanner in hand, face pale in the portable lights. "The transmission changed," he said. "It's not just a pulse anymore. It's data, organized information." "In what format?" "Old military code. World War II era. I'm running it through translation software, but it's going to take time." Caldwell took the scanner and studied the waveforms. "Could this be automatic? Some kind of beacon that's been running on leftover power for 60 years. "No. Whatever's broadcasting down there has an active power source." We stood in silence, watching the screen pulse with information none of us could read. The rain had stopped completely now. The forest was totally still. In the distance, something made a sound like metal scraping against metal. "Everyone armed," Caldwell ordered. "We maintain perimeter until dawn. Smith, you're back on watch. Reynolds, get some rest. Donovan, keep monitoring that signal. I want to know the second anything changes." I took my position again, this time with Caldwell staying up with me. We didn't talk. There wasn't much to say. Whatever was happening here was beyond standard recovery operations. This had become something else entirely. At 1:47 a.m., the voices came back. This time they were clearer. Multiple voices overlapping, speaking in urgent tones. They seemed to come from everywhere at once. From the trees, from the ground, from the fog itself. And they were speaking English. "Convoy halt. Maintain radio silence. Movement in the trees." Caldwell grabbed his radio. "Donovan, you getting this?" "Affirmative. It's coming through on multiple frequencies. Some kind of echo effect. They're surrounding us. No visual contact. Something's wrong with the instruments." I felt the hair on my neck rise. These weren't random transmissions. These were radio calls, old ones, from the convoy when it was still active, still alive. Somehow, the hillside was playing back recordings from many years ago. "All units fall back. Repeat, fall back to secondary position. They're not human." The transmission cut to static, then silence again. Caldwell and I looked at each other. His face showed the same thing I was feeling. Not fear exactly, something closer to knowing, like we'd stumbled into something that had been waiting for us. "They ran into something," I said quietly. "That convoy, they didn't just get lost. They were running from something. Or they found something they weren't supposed to find." Mac came out of his tent, half-dressed, weapon ready. "What the heck was that?" "History," Caldwell said. "And it's not finished yet." We spent the rest of the night on high alert, all four of us awake and armed. The voices didn't return, but the signal kept transmitting. Donovan worked through the night decoding it, his face lit by the scanner's blue glow. At 6:12 a.m., just before dawn, he called us over. "I've got something," he said. His voice was shaky. "The transmission includes coordinates. A location about 200 yards northwest of here." "What's there?" Caldwell asked. "According to the old military maps, nothing. Just forest. But according to this signal, something called Site Verdant." The name meant nothing to me. Caldwell's face showed no recognition either. But Donovan pulled up a classified file on his tablet, one he'd accessed using his security clearance. "Site Verdant was a research facility," he read. "Established 1943, shut down 1947. Purpose classified. Location classified. All records sealed under national security rules." "What kind of research?" Mac asked. "It doesn't say, but there's a note here. All people assigned to Site Verdant required psychological evaluation when they left. 3 staff members stayed in psychiatric care until their deaths. No visitors allowed." The fog was lifting as the sun rose, showing the forest in shades of gray. Birds started calling, careful at first, then growing bolder. Normal forest sounds. But nothing about this felt normal anymore. "We need to find that site," I said. Caldwell shook his head. "We wait for the recovery team. Those are our orders." Those orders were written before we knew what we were dealing with. That convoy was coming from or going to Site Verdant. Whatever they ran into is connected to that facility. If we wait, we lose the chance to document it before someone higher up decides to classify everything and bury it again. Caldwell was silent for a long moment. Then he checked his weapon and slung it across his chest. 2 hours. We do a fast look around, document what we find, and return before 9 a.m. If we're not back by then, the recovery team will know where to look. We broke camp quickly, taking only essential gear. Donovan brought his scanner and tablet. I carried the camera and GPS unit. Mac grabbed the ground radar rig, portable but heavy. Caldwell took point with the compass and coordinates. The forest northwest of our position was old growth, thick with undergrowth and fallen timber. We moved slowly, checking our heading every few minutes. The smell of wet earth was strong, mixed with pine and the faint hint of that ozone scent from the night before. At 7:04 a.m., we found the first marker. It was a concrete post, waist-high, mostly buried in moss and leaves. The top had a metal plate with a number stamped into it. SV-12. Site Verdant, marker 12. We're close, Donovan said. We followed the markers northwest, finding them every 100 yards. SV-11, SV-10, SV-9. Each one took us deeper into the forest, further from any known trail. The trees grew denser, the undergrowth thinned, and the temperature dropped noticeably. At marker SV-03, we found the fence. It was 10 feet tall, chain link topped with rusted barbed wire. Most of it had collapsed, pulled down by many years of tree growth and weather. But sections still stood, creating a broken boundary around something in the trees ahead. Beyond the fence, the forest changed. The trees were dead. Not recently dead, but skeletal, bleached white by time and sun. Nothing grew beneath them. The ground was bare earth and rock, as if something had killed the soil. Jesus Christ, Mac whispered. We found a gap in the fence and moved through. The dead zone stretched about 50 yards in every direction, a perfect circle of lifeless ground. In the center stood the remains of buildings. Concrete bunkers half collapsed, their roofs caved in. Metal structures reduced to rust and twisted frames. And in the middle of it all, a shaft. The shaft was 15 feet across, ringed with concrete, going straight down into darkness. A metal grating had once covered it, but now the grating lay beside the opening, torn free. Whether by time or on purpose, we couldn't tell. Donovan's scanner went wild. The signals coming from down there, strong, clear, still transmitting after all these years. This is what they found, Caldwell said quietly. The convoy. They came here and discovered this place was still active. I walked to the shaft carefully and shone my light down. The beam disappeared into black, reflecting off nothing. The depth was impossible to tell, but the smell that rose from below was familiar. Oil, rust, and that living scent that had haunted the convoy site. Max set up the ground radar and ran a scan. The display showed the shaft going down at least 200 feet before the signal got too weak. But there were structures down there. Rooms, hallways, an entire facility built into the bedrock. What were they researching? I asked. Donovan was reading from his tablet, pulling up more classified files. The facility was run by a joint Army OSS team. Project name, Deep Watch. Goal, study of underground phenomena and development of... He stopped reading. Development of what? Caldwell demanded. It's blacked out. The whole section is redacted. But there's a mission log from November 1946. Listen to this. Facility evacuation completed under emergency rules. 11 people unaccounted for. Site sealed pending further evaluation. Recommendation: do not attempt recovery operations. 11 people, Max said. They left 11 people down there. I thought about the convoy, about the driver sitting in his truck looking over his shoulder at something behind him, about the voices in the dark talking about things that weren't human. They didn't leave them, I said. They trapped them, along with whatever they were studying. The scanner beeped. Donovan looked down at it, and his face went pale. The signal just changed again. It's not broadcasting anymore. What is it doing? Receiving. Something down there is listening. For a long moment, none of us moved. The dead trees creaked in a wind we couldn't feel. The shaft breathed out cold air that smelled of many years and secrets. And somewhere far below, in rooms that hadn't seen light since 1946, something was aware that we were here. Caldwell made the decision. We document everything and get out. Photos, measurements, scanner readings. 5 minutes, then we're gone. We worked fast. I photographed the shaft, the buildings, the dead zone. Mac ran multiple radar scans, building a map of the underground structure. Donovan recorded every frequency and signal pattern his equipment could detect. Caldwell stood watch, scanning the tree line. At 7:41 a.m., the voices returned. They came from the shaft. Not through our radios this time, but actual sound rising from the depths. Multiple voices speaking together, like a chant or prayer. The words were English but distorted, stretched thin by echo and time. Waiting, still waiting. They promised extraction. No light. It's been so long. No light. It's awake. We tried to warn them. It's always been awake. The voices overlapped, becoming a chorus of desperation and madness. They rose in volume, filling the dead zone. Then suddenly they stopped, cut off mid-word. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. From deep in the shaft came a new noise. Mechanical grinding like old machinery struggling to life. "Move," Caldwell ordered. "Now." We ran through the dead zone, through the gap in the fence, into the living forest beyond. Behind us, the grinding grew louder, joined by a vibration you could feel through the ground. Something was moving down there. Something large. We didn't stop until we reached marker SV-12. Only then did Caldwell let us pause to catch our breath. Looking back toward the facility, you could see nothing but trees. But you could feel it, that sense of being watched, of having woken something that should have stayed sleeping. "The convoy," Max said between breaths. "They came to investigate just like us. They found the shaft. They heard the voices. And something followed them out." Donovan checked his scanner one last time. "The signal's gone. Whatever was down there isn't transmitting anymore." "Because it doesn't need to," I said. "It knows where we are." We made it back to base camp at 8:23 a.m. The recovery team was already there. 3 trucks and a dozen people. A captain whose name tape read Morrison walked up to Caldwell with a clipboard and a tight expression. "You're late," he said. "And you were supposed to stay with the convoy site." Caldwell didn't apologize. He handed Morrison the camera and Donovan's tablet. "You need to see what we found." Morrison looked through the photos, his face not changing. Then he looked at the coordinates for Site Verdant. When he looked up again, his expression had shifted from annoyed to something closer to afraid. "You went to the facility. You know about it," Caldwell said. It wasn't a question. "Everyone with clearance knows about it. And everyone with clearance knows you don't go near it." He lowered his voice. "Did you go down the shaft?" "No. We documented the entrance and left." "Did anything follow you?" The question hung in the air. Before anyone could answer, one of Morrison's team called out. He was standing near the edge of our camp, looking down the slope toward the mudslide site. "Captain, you need to see this." We moved to the edge and looked down. The mudslide had changed. The smooth surface we'd left the night before was now disturbed. Deep furrows cut through the mud. Parallel lines about 6 feet apart, like something with wheels or tracks had rolled through during the night. But the furrows didn't lead anywhere. They started in the middle of the slide and ended at the tree line, where fresh earth had been pushed aside. Something had come up from underground and moved into the forest. Morrison stared at the tracks for a long time. Then he turned to his team. "Full containment protocol. Lock down this site. Nothing comes in, nothing goes out." "What about us?" Caldwell asked. "You're staying here until we figure out what you released." "We didn't release anything. It was already awake." Morrison's face hardened. "Then you need to tell me everything. Every detail, every sound, every reading on those scanners. Because if what I think is down there got out, we have a serious problem." "What is down there?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Something we tried to bury. Something that won't stay buried." The rain started again as Morrison's team set up a larger perimeter around the entire area. Floodlights, motion sensors, armed guards. What had been a simple recovery operation had become something else. A containment situation. I sat in one of the team's trucks while Morrison asked questions. What time did you hear the voices? What exactly did they say? How deep was the shaft? Did you see any movement in the dead zone? I answered everything, but Morrison's face showed he already knew most of it. This wasn't new to him. Site Verdant had a history, and it wasn't finished. As night fell again, I stood outside watching the team work. The smell of diesel from their generators mixed with the rain and the forest. Somewhere in the dark, something that had been buried for many years was moving through the trees. And the only thing I knew for certain was that it had followed us back from that shaft. Morrison kept us separated in a command tent while his team swept the area. Night hunt. Every hour someone would report back. No visual contact. No heat signatures. Just those tracks leading into the forest, disappearing where the ground turned to rock. At 10 p.m., Morrison finally brought us into the briefing. He spread a map across the table, marking sites with red circles. Site Verdant. The mudslide location. Our base camp. Project Deep Watch, he began, was started in 1943 after a mining operation broke through into a cave system. What they found changed everything we thought we knew about these mountains. Morrison pulled out a file, yellow with age, stamped with classifications I'd never seen before. The caves went deeper than any natural formation should. There were structures down there, passages, rooms carved with precision. None of it recent, none of it human. The tent was silent except for the rain drumming overhead. The military built the facility on top of it, Morrison continued. Started exploring, documenting everything. Then in 1945 they found the machine, built into the rock itself, part of a system that went miles underground. Engineering beyond anything we had then or now. They got it working, Donovan said. Morrison nodded. November 1946. Immediately, everything went wrong. People reported sounds from deeper in the system. Voices, movement, things that shouldn't be alive down there. The director ordered evacuation, but 11 people refused to leave. They said the machine had to be watched, that shutting it down would be worse. What happened to them? I asked. They sealed themselves in. Last transmission was a warning. Something was coming up from below. Something the machine had woken. Then the line went dead. The army sealed the shaft, shut down the site, and buried all records. But they kept monitoring it, Caldwell said. Yes, the signal you detected, that's been broadcasting since 1946. Those 11 people, or what's left of them, are still down there. Still transmitting. Still warning anyone who will listen. Morrison pointed to the map. The convoy you found, Containment Team 1959, sent to check the seals. They never reported back. Until now. I thought about the driver, head turned, looking back. Those voices, they're not human. What came up from that shaft? I asked. Morrison's jaw tightened. We call them the deep ones. The machine didn't just wake them. It opened a door. Every few years, something tries to come through. These things eat. Anyone who meets them disappears. No bodies. No trace. Caldwell stood. Then we track it. Find it before morning. My team handles containment, Morrison said. You're being pulled out at first light. Like heck, I said. We found this site. We're not leaving until it's contained. Morrison studied us for a long moment, then nodded. Fine, but you follow my rules exactly. He handed us equipment. Modified radios transmitting on frequencies the things couldn't stand. Flares with specific wavelengths. Small explosives for collapsing tunnels. The tracking team leaves in 15 minutes, Morrison said. As we geared up, Donovan pulled me aside. That signal, it's not a warning anymore. It's a countdown. We have maybe 6 hours before it breaks free. 6 hours. Dawn. Morrison's team moved out. We followed the furrows into the forest. Broken branches. Disturbed earth. That ozone smell marking the path. 2 miles in, we found the first victim, one of Patterson's forestry crew. The body looked pulled inside out, then compressed. Bones shattered. Tissue fused in ways that defied biology. "It's feeding," Morrison said. "Life force. Energy. Whatever makes a person alive." We moved faster. The trail led back towards Site Verdant. Back to the shaft. At 1:47 a.m., we reached the fence. The dead zone looked different at night. White trees glowing in our flashlights. And in the center, the shaft pulsed with faint blue light. Near the shaft, something moved. It was hard to look at directly. 8 feet tall. Limbs bending in too many places. Surface rippling like water. Carried one of Morrison's team. Still alive, struggling weakly. Morrison raised his modified radio. A high-pitched tone filled the air. The thing stopped, dropped the body, turned toward us. Morrison fired a flare. It burst in brilliant white light. The thing pulled back, surface rippling wildly. For a moment I saw its true form. Not solid. Not liquid. Something between states. "Drive it back," Morrison shouted. Into the shaft. We moved forward, firing flares. The thing retreated, flowing across the ground like thick oil. It made sounds that formed pictures in your mind. Images of darkness. Endless falling. Donovan stumbled. His nose was bleeding. "Don't listen," Morrison warned. "The sounds infect your thoughts." We pushed it back to the shaft's edge. From below came answering sounds. I realized with horror it wasn't alone. Others waited down there. Morrison pulled a detonator. "I'm collapsing the shaft. Everyone back. Now." We ran. Morrison placed explosives around the opening. The thing watched, making no move to attack, as if it understood and accepted what was coming. We cleared the fence as Morrison triggered the explosion. The shaft collapsed inward. Concrete and steel falling into the depths. The thing flowed down into darkness, joining whatever waited below. The blue light died. The humming stopped. The dead zone went silent. "It's done," Morrison said. We got the injured soldier and began the hike back. The fog lifted. By 4 a.m. you could see stars. The forest felt lighter. At 5:30 a.m., Morrison stopped us at a clearing. This is where the convoy made their stand in 1959. Instead of letting it reach the highway, they drove into that ravine. Buried themselves alive to trap it. "They saved everyone," Max said quietly. "Yes, and now their story gets buried again." We reached base camp as the sun rose. A helicopter waited, rotors turning. Morrison handed Caldwell a non-disclosure agreement. "Sign this, all of you. What happened here stays classified for 75 years. We signed. What choice did we have? Some truths are too dangerous to share. "That countdown," Morrison said as we boarded. "It stopped when we sealed the shaft. But it'll start again. Maybe in 10 years. Maybe 50. Someone else will be sent to contain it. It's a cycle that's been running since 1946. The helicopter lifted off. Below, Morrison's team erased every sign we'd been there. Within days, even the mudslide would be smoothed over, made to look natural. I watched the mountains fall away. Somewhere down there, 11 people who should have been dead for 60 years were still maintaining that machine. Still keeping the door closed. We landed at Fort Bragg 6 hours later. Debriefed. Told to return to normal duty. Told to forget. But you can't forget. Not the way that thing moved. Not the sounds it made. Not the blue light from that shaft. 2 weeks later, I requested a transfer. Caldwell did the same. We didn't talk about what happened. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound crazy. Years have passed since that October. I don't work recovery operations anymore. I teach now. Basic training. Safe. Predictable. Far from forests and caves and things that shouldn't exist. But sometimes, late at night, I hear rain on the roof and smell that mix of diesel and wet earth. And I remember standing at that shaft's edge, looking down into depths that went further than any hole should go. The official record says we recovered 4 vehicles from a mudslide. Equipment salvage. Routine operation. No casualties. That's the story that gets filed and forgotten. But the real story stays with you forever. A quiet voice reminding you that the world is stranger than most realize. That there are things beneath the mountains. Things that were old when humanity was young. Things that wait with patience measured in centuries. And someday, someone else will get a call about a mudslide in West Virginia. They'll find something they weren't looking for. And the cycle will continue. Because some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. You can only hold them shut and hope the seals last another generation. I still count sometimes. Mile markers, grid coordinates, anything with numbers. A habit from that mountain. A way to keep your mind steady when nothing else makes sense. Late at night, when rain sounds like radio static and darkness presses close, I count the years since Spruce Knob. Each one is another year the seals held. Another year the door stayed closed. Another year those 11 people stayed at their posts, keeping watch over something that should have stayed buried. That's the real story, not the one in the files. And now you know it too. If you made it this far, you understand why some secrets stay classified. Why some operations have no official record. Why some soldiers never talk about certain missions. The convoy is still down there, buried in that ravine. The shaft is still sealed. The machine is still running, powered by 11 people who refuse to leave their post. And something is still waiting, patient, ancient, ready for the next time someone digs too deep. Don't forget to hit that like button if the story kept you up at night. And watch the next video on your screen because there are more stories out there. More secrets. More things that wait in the dark. Just remember, not all of them stay buried.